In the hush of that private dining room, the words cut sharper than any blade. You think a black waitress could ever understand what it means to hold power? Hand her a black card and she'll waste it on junk. It wasn't whispered. It was spat out, raw and cruel. The room didn't gasp. No, it laughed. That polite, poisonous kind of laughter that makes cruelty sound like a joke. At the head of the long mahogany table sat Alexander Reed, billionaire, CEO, king of steel and glass. His jaw tightened, but his mouth stayed shut. He was too used to masks, too used to silence. Across from him stood Aaliyah Brooks, 23 years old, a waitress, a tray still balanced in her hand like she didn't belong. Because truthfully, she didn't. Not here, not among the actresses with diamond smiles, the attorneys with blades of tongues, the models who lived for camera flashes. Aaliyah was different. She smelled of coffee and detergent. She had no gloss, no armor, and yet the spotlight had found her. On the table before her rested a single black card. No limit, no ceiling, no rules. A loaded weapon disguised as plastic. 3 women already eyed it with hungry smirks, their minds racing with yachts, champagne, and paparazzi headlines. But when Aaliyah's fingers trembled and finally closed around the card, her eyes didn't gleam with greed. They burned with something else, something no one in that room could quite name. And that was when Alexander Reed felt it. The crack, the first fracture in his certainty. Because this wasn't just another game. This wasn't just another test of wealth and vanity. No, this was about to become the one story that would strip him bare. See, Alexander wasn't a man who stumbled into experiments. He built them. He engineered them. Every move of his empire had been calculated, traded, won. But for all the towers he owned, for all the endless money he poured into the world, something inside him had been hollowed out long ago. He had loved twice. He had trusted twice. And both times, betrayal had devoured him. One woman vanished the moment his stocks dipped. Another clung to him longer, whispering promises while secretly draining his fortune through lies and fake charities. When it all collapsed, it wasn't just money he lost. He lost faith. He lost the ability to believe in anyone's love beyond his bank account. Since then, every smile looked rehearsed. Every touch felt like a transaction. He could be surrounded by admirers, yet sit alone in suspicion. Not lonely, but haunted by the thought that no one saw him anymore. Just the empire. That's when the idea was born. A test. A game. What happens when you hand someone pure power, unlimited wealth, and simply watch? Do they reach for vanity? For ambition? For greed? Or does something deeper break through? And so, Alexander picked his players. 3 women from his glittering world. Victoria Hale, the actress who lived for the spotlight, her beauty sharpened into a weapon. Samantha Cruz, the attorney who wore ambition like armor, who once joked she wasn't breathing if she wasn't billing $500 an hour. And Madison Clark, the model whose every breath became content, an empire of likes and followers at her command. Fame, ambition, vanity, predictable hunger, the perfect control group. But then came the 4th, Aaliyah, the one who wasn't supposed to be there, the one who slipped into his memory years ago on a restless night, serving him coffee in a Brooklyn diner. She hadn't recognized him. She hadn't cared. She only smiled, a crooked, unpolished smile, and teased him about his tie. A moment so small he should have forgotten it, but he didn't. And so here she was, the 4th card, the unpredictable variable, the one who might prove everything, or shatter it all. 4 women, 4 cards, 3 days, and one truth Alexander Reed could no longer hide from. She wasn't impulsive, at least not usually. But the second Aaliyah walked into that dining room in Midtown Manhattan, it was clear she didn't belong. Not according to society's rules, anyway. The chandeliers glowed gold against marble floors, and the women at the table looked like royalty. Designer gowns, glittering jewelry, effortless perfection. Aaliyah, on the other hand, wore a borrowed black dress, hemmed awkwardly because it was too long. Her thrift store purse was clutched tight against her side, like it might anchor her in that sea of wealth. The whisper started before she even reached her seat. Victoria's lips curled into a mocking smirk. Madison leaned toward Samantha, covering her mouth as she whispered something that made the attorney chuckle. It was a kind of laugh sharp enough to cut. And Alia felt it. The sting of those eyes, the weight of 1,000 silent judgments. It was a look she had lived with her entire life. The look that said, "You're less valuable, less important, less deserving." But when Alexander Reed slid the black envelope across the table, everything went still. Alia picked it up. She turned it over in her hands, studying it like it was a puzzle instead of a prize. "You're giving this to me?" she asked, her voice calm, though disbelief edged every word. Alexander's expression didn't change. He only nodded. 3 days. No limits. Spend it however you see fit. The room buzzed with cruel amusement. Someone muttered, "She'll probably buy sneakers and fast food." Another sneered, "Maybe a wig and cheap gold hoops." The laughter was sharp, poisonous. But Alia didn't flinch. She slipped the card into her purse, lifted her chin, and simply said, "We'll see." It was a small moment, but it shifted the air. The other women accepted their cards with arrogance. Alia accepted Hayes with quiet defiance. And for the first time that night, Alexander Reed leaned forward, intrigued. It didn't take long for the spending to begin. Alexander's assistant, Daniel, monitored the accounts in real time. By the end of the first day, the numbers told a story. Victoria Hale, the actress, wasted no time. She paraded down Fifth Avenue with a camera crew trailing behind. Paparazzi snapped photos as she draped herself in diamonds, ordered a Paris couture gown, and placed a deposit on a yacht in Miami. It wasn't about the things. It was about the spotlight. She wanted the world to see her freedom glitter. Samantha Cruz, the attorney, moved differently. No designer shoes, no champagne. Instead, she called contractors, consultants, lobbyists. By day 2, she had signed for an entire floor in a downtown skyscraper. She named it the Cruz Power Initiative, a think tank to push her influence deeper into politics. Every swipe of the card was a move on her chessboard. Madison Clark, the model, went a predictable route. She booked a penthouse in Las Vegas, flooded it with champagne and neon lights, and threw a party streamed live to her millions of followers. Every drink, every glittering smile, captured, posted, consumed. "Living limitless," she captioned, and her likes soared into the thousands. Watching the three of them spend was like watching a script he had already read. Fame, ambition, vanity, predictable, shallow. Alexander sipped his whiskey, unimpressed. This was exactly what he expected. But then there was the waitress. When Daniel refreshed the monitor to check Alia's transactions, his brow furrowed. Groceries. He read aloud. Rice. Canned goods. Fresh produce. Paint from a hardware store in Brooklyn. He scrolled further. Children's toys. Diapers. Second-hand clothes. And, wait, 200 hot dogs. Alexander almost laughed. But something in his chest tightened instead. 200 hot dogs. That wasn't greed. That wasn't vanity. That was different. Meanwhile, the whispers spread. At Madison's Vegas party, someone pulled up the list of Alia's purchases and read them aloud between shots of champagne. Laughter erupted. "She's treating a black card like a food stamp," one man scoffed. Victoria smirked, glass raised high. "You can dress poverty in black silk, but it's still poverty." Their cruelty rippled through the crowd. To them, Alia's choices were laughable, proof she didn't belong. But Alexander didn't hear embarrassment in those receipts. He heard a riddle, and he needed to see the answer for himself. 2 days in, he drove away from his towers of glass and steel, away from the velvet ropes and private chefs, and into the cracked sidewalks of Brooklyn. And there it was, the community center. Windows taped with plastic, bricks chipped with age. Out front sat a rented van, its doors thrown open. And Alia, sleeves rolled, hair tied back, arms full of boxes. Kids surrounded her, shouting, laughing, grabbing bags of food and toy from her hands. Her laughter rang out with theirs, unguarded, unpolished, real. Alexander sat in his car for a long time, just watching. He had expected greed. He had expected ambition. But he had not expected this. A young woman, handed limitless wealth, choosing not to lift herself, but to lift everyone else. And in that moment, For the first time in years, the walls around Alexander Reed's cynicism began to crack. The gala shimmered like a jewel box suspended over the Hudson River. A glass ballroom, chandeliers glittering like constellations, the hum of champagne and ambition filling the air. Chauffeured cars lined up outside, cameras flashing as New York's elite swept through the doors. Tonight wasn't just a party. It was Madison Clark's coronation, funded by her limitless black card. Actors, bankers, politicians, everyone who was anyone had shown up. And then there was Aaliyah. She didn't glide across the marble in couture. She stepped in quietly, wearing a navy dress borrowed from a neighbor, simple flats on her feet, her hair tied neatly in a bun. She didn't carry herself like she belonged on a stage. She carried herself like she wanted to vanish into the crowd. Yet, somehow, her presence shifted the air the moment she entered. Whispers slithered through the room. "Is she staff?" someone asked, eyebrows raised. "No," came the answer. "That's the waitress, the one with the card." The laughter that followed was low, but sharp enough to sting. Madison, glowing in a sequin gown that shimmered under the chandelier's light, leaned toward Samantha and let her voice carry just enough. "You can give a girl from Brooklyn $1 million," she said sweetly, "but you can't buy her class." The cruelty spread like perfume. When the first toast was raised, everyone's glass sparkled with champagne. Everyone's but Aaliyah's. The waiter set down a cheaper wine at a place, smirks curling on faces nearby. "Fitting," one man whispered. She wouldn't know the difference anyway. And then came Victoria. Ever the actress, ever the performer, she floated to the microphone with a smile that hit a blade. "It's inspiring, isn't it?" she began. "To see how generosity can change a world. Some of us build legacies, others," she paused deliberately, locking eyes with Aaliyah, "by hot dogs." The ballroom erupted. Laughter ricocheted off the glass walls, cruel applause disguised as amusement. Aaliyah sat frozen. Her throat burned, her chest ached, humiliation crawling up her neck. She wanted to run, to disappear into the Brooklyn streets that, for all their cracks and shadows, at least felt like home. But then she looked across the room. Alexander Reed was watching her. His expression wasn't mocking. It wasn't amused. It was troubled, as if even he realized the cruelty had gone too far. Aaliyah lifted a chin. She didn't cry. She didn't break. She sat tall, defiant in her silence. And in that moment, she didn't look small at all. She looked unshakable. And for Alexander Reed, that quiet defiance spoke louder than the laughter of an entire room. That night, Alexander couldn't sleep. The sneers, the mockery, Victoria's voice saying hot dog again and again, it all echoed in his mind. But what haunted him most was the way Aaliyah had sat there, chin high, refusing to shatter. Something inside him whispered that she was hiding far more than anyone in that ballroom could see. So he called Daniel. "Pull her transactions again," he ordered. Every detail. What came up on the screen wasn't indulgence. It wasn't self-promotion. It was a map of sacrifice. The groceries Aaliyah had purchased, delivered straight to a Brooklyn food pantry struggling to keep shelves full. The toys and diapers, donated to a shelter for single mothers. The second-hand clothes, sent to families who had lost everything in a fire. And those 200 hot dogs, they weren't a joke. They were for a block party she had organized outside the crumbling community center. She was quietly restoring. As Daniel scrolled, the list grew heavier. Paint, lumber, cleaning supplies, all for that same neglected center. But then came the entry that silenced the room. A payment to a hospital. A large sum. Daniel's voice softened as he read it. She cleared the medical bills for a woman with breast cancer. Someone who couldn't afford treatment. Alexander's chest tightened. He remembered her telling the waiter at the gala that her mother had died young. Now he understood. This wasn't random charity. This was personal. She wasn't wasting wealth. She was fighting the battles others couldn't. Battles she knew too well. And the last transaction? $50,000 wired to establish a scholarship fund. Not for her. Not for fame. 4 black students in Brooklyn. Kids who dreamed of college but couldn't afford to go. Alexander sat back in stunned silence. Victoria had bought diamonds. Samantha had bought power. Madison had bought attention. And Aaliyah, the one marked as a waitress, had bought futures. For the first time in years, Alexander felt shame. Shame that he had doubted her. Shame that he had sat silent while others laughed. Shame that it took numbers on a screen for him to see what had been in front of him all along. And along with that shame came something else. Admiration. Maybe even something deeper. But in Alexander Reed's world, light never stayed pure for long. The brighter Aaliyah's truth shone, the faster the shadows gathered. It began with a headline splashed across a gossip site. Waitress uses billionaire's card for self-promotion. The article twisted her generosity into ambition. The food donations, stage photo ops, the scholarship fund, a stunt. By morning, her name was trending for all the wrong reasons. At Alexander's next board meeting, whispers filled the polished oak room. A newspaper slid across the table. The headline screamed, "Charity scam. Billionaire's black card misused." He tried to defend her. He insisted the transactions were clean. But then came the photos, grainy shot of Aaliyah outside the community center, smiling with children, arms full of supplies. To cynics, they weren't acts of kindness. They were staged campaigns, proof she was playing the system. And the voices fanning the flames? Victoria gave an interview, smirking into the camera. "I admire her hustle," she said, "turning hot dogs into headlines. That's clever." Samantha went further. Cold, cutting, suggesting that Aaliyah was pocketing money for herself, using charity as a ladder. Madison didn't need to say a word. Her silence, paired with carefully timed posts, was enough to push the narrative deeper. The world was turning against Aaliyah Brooks. And this time, it wasn't just laughter in a ballroom. It was war.